Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to log in and get settled. We've got a lot of material to cover, so get comfortable, get some snacks, and we'll start in maybe 3 or 4 minutes, okay? So sit tight and we will begin around 7:05. So once again, good evening, everyone. Welcome, and we'll start in a few minutes. I just want to give folks a chance to log on to the webinar, and then once everyone's settled in, we'll get started. So again, around 7:05, we'll get started, okay?
I'm starting my thing, but I feel like when I have the
Good evening, everyone. About half of you who registered are here, so let's give it a few more minutes to let people sign in, and then we'll get started at 7:05, okay? So 7:05, we'll come back and start the webinar. All right, well, good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar in the Lowell PTSA's College Readiness Series. Today, we're going to learn about personal statements, what you should and should not write about, and how to come up with ideas for your college application essays. Today's presentation will go for about 90 minutes because there is so much material to cover on this topic. We will have some time at the end for questions and answers when I will be joined by Ms. Maria Aguirre from Lowell's College Counseling Center. And right before we start the Q&A, I'll give you the web address to sign up for 1 hour of free personal statement advising and editing, compliments of the Lowell PTSA. This free hour of essay editing is being offered to current Lowell juniors only. and you have to have registered for and attended tonight's webinar to be eligible. So please look for that URL at the very end of my presentation and right before the Q&A. Space is limited, so we will take students on a first come, first served basis. Before we jump in, a little bit about my background. My name is Randolf Arguelles, and I'm the branch director at Elite Prep San Francisco. I've been helping students prepare for college for more than 15 years, and for 7 of those years, I read and scored freshman applications at my alma mater, UC Berkeley. So tonight I will share with you what I learned as an application reader for a highly selective university. This information from tonight's webinar is applicable to any selective or highly selective college, not just Berkeley or the UC system. We will take a look at the personal statement prompts for both the UC application and the common application, which is used for private schools. Just a couple of technical notes before we begin. In this webinar, you can see me, but I cannot see or hear you. Please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. Just type in your questions to the Q&A box. Ms. Aguirre and I will address live questions at the end, but chances are many of your questions will be answered in the course of the presentation anyway. We will also try to answer some questions as they are posted before the live Q&A. If your question is not answered today because our time is limited, don't worry, just contact me or Ms. Aguirre. We'll be happy to help you out. I'll put up our email addresses during Q&A. And so let us begin. I'm going to share my screen and you will, let's see here. And you should see the presentation. So welcome to Jumpstart Your Personal Statement. And just a quick note on terminology. I use college application essay and personal statement interchangeably. So before we begin talking about personal statements, I want to point out that you have a goal on your college application. There is, in fact, something you need to keep in mind as you work towards brainstorming and writing your personal statements. So what is the overall goal what is your overall goal on the college application? And that goal is to stand out in a good way from the tens of thousands of other applicants applying to the same school. So first of all, apologies if you attended my previous webinar on holistic review. The next few slides are going to be slightly repetitive. But first, I'd like to have you guys take a poll. So I have a question for you. How many applications did UCLA receive for the fall 2019 freshman class? So just go ahead and take your best guess. Give it a few minutes for folks to answer. And then I'll share the results. Okay, so about 85% of you responded. So I'm going to end the poll. And here's the results. And yes, the majority is correct. 61% of you said UCLA received 111,306 applications for the fall 2019 freshman class. And that is correct. The 99,125 was the number of applications received by UC San Diego, the second most popular college in America based on the number of applications received. And then the 87,393 is the number of applications that UC Berkeley received. And 78,092 is the number of applications that UC Davis received for the fall 2019 freshman class. So the point of this poll is to show you that there's a lot of students applying to these colleges. So, and for the private schools, USC, for example, received 64,352 applications for the fall 2018 freshman class. So with this many people applying, there will be thousands of applicants with exactly the same GPA and the same test scores and the same list of activities as you. So the personal statements can go a long way towards helping you differentiate yourself from the tens of thousands of other people applying to the same school. So also, again, this might look familiar if you attended my previous webinar. This is how application readers will evaluate your application in the process called holistic review. It's called holistic review because college application readers look at more than just your GPA and test scores, right? They look at your academic profile, your extracurricular profile, and your personal and family information. Now, all three of these areas can be amplified and elaborated on in your personal statements. However, your academic profile is going to depend largely on your grades and the strength of your coursework and your test scores. All of that information is included elsewhere in your application. So it's probably better to use your personal statements to further describe what you do outside the classroom, not inside the classroom, right? So again, while all three of these areas can be discussed and amplified in a personal statement, your academic profile is established elsewhere in the application. And it's probably more prudent to use your personal statements to amplify your extracurricular profile and your personal and family information, okay? But in some cases, some students will use their personal statements to talk about their academic profile. That consists of GPA, strength of class schedule, test scores, and other factors. So a question I often get is, will a brilliant personal statement overcome a mediocre academic profile? Probably not. In most cases, the academic profile is more important than the personal statement. But then again, this year, I was working with a senior who got into a highly selective college with a GPA below the average of the accepted students and an SAT score below the average of the accepted students. Mind you, his GPA and test scores were within the range of accepted scores and accepted GPAs to that school, but it was below the average. And so I think that his personal statements got him admitted because they really were very, very strong. And so in that case, at least in that one case, the personal statement did sort of convince the admissions office that it was worth taking a chance on this kid, even though his grades and test scores were below the average of the accepted students at that school. How can personal statements amplify the extracurricular profile? Well, extracurricular profile consists of clubs and organizations, community service and volunteer work, sports, music, art, and special projects. Your activities list on the common application and on the UC application, your activities list, which names the activities you've been involved in, and that's clubs, sports, volunteer work and community service, employment, family duties and obligations. These are all part of the activities list, and the activities list serves as one of the main sources of talking points for your personal statements. So when you're looking for something to write about, you should go to your activities list and really hone in on one or two things that you can amplify in the personal statements themselves. There's a question that came in, does the class schedule of senior year contribute to the academic profile? And the answer is yes, it does. The colleges will see what you're taking in your senior year because you report what you're taking in your senior year. Okay, the third part of holistic review is your personal and family profile. And that consists of socioeconomic status. FGC means first generation to college. If you are the first generation in your family to go to college, then that's considered a slight hardship. any employment, family responsibilities, disabilities, personal hardships, and personal qualities. The last 4 items on this list are often addressed in the personal statements on the UC and Common applications. So in addition to amplifying your extracurricular profile through your activities list, personal statements are also often used to talk about family responsibilities, disabilities, personal hardships, and personal qualities. Okay, so that's how personal statements can illustrate, amplify, elaborate on the 3 areas that appear on your college application in the holistic review. So now let's talk about some general advice about personal statements. One thing to take note of is that most personal statements are in fact bad, or at least not helpful. So if you can write a good one, it will definitely help you stand out. And remember your goal on your college application: stand out in a good way from the tens of thousands of other students also applying to the same schools. So I say that most personal statements are bad or not helpful because I've read a lot of these. So when I was reading applications for Berkeley, I was assigned 500 to 600 applications every season to read. If you add the number of personal statements that I've read helping students at Elite, I estimate that I've read probably 10,000 personal statements by now in this point in my career. And yeah, in fact, the vast majority of actual personal statements that I've read on the Berkeley applications, they were mostly not helpful. Some examples of the less helpful personal statements that I've read: one of them wrote about how my friends are really important to me. Now, personally, I think that's a good quality in a person, to really value your friends, but that doesn't really help you stand out, right? I mean, my friends are important to everyone. So that doesn't really help differentiate you when you write about how your friends are important to you. Another not so helpful personal statement was a student wrote about how she was getting a C in AP biology, and then she studied really hard and got an A. Again, great, absolutely good job, but first of all, you're expected to get good grades, right? So writing about something that you're expected to do, it seems sort of, it makes you seem kind of shallow and like kind of not in touch with what's expected of you, and what is considered like above and beyond the normal course of events. So that one also not super helpful. Another not super helpful personal statement, the student wrote about how he's super punctual. And again, I think it's a great quality to be punctual, but not so helpful in helping a college figure out what would this student bring to the campus if we admitted this student, right? So, I mean, bringing punctuality is, I think, a good thing, but also again, you're expected to be punctual. So writing about something that you're expected to do doesn't really help you stand out, okay? So some other general advice. Application readers will absolutely read your personal statements. So people always ask, they're always kind of suspicious. Do people really read the personal statements? Yes, they will absolutely read the personal statements. They will not ignore them, but they will read them very quickly. And so I mentioned this because you need to make sure that the information in your personal statements is well organized and your writing style is very clear. I've had students in the past whose writing style was like, they'd like to like drop hints and innuendos and avoid stating something directly, but that writing style will not help you on a personal statement when you've got a stack of applications, this thick to get through in the weekend. They're not going to appreciate having to slow down and figure out what you're trying to hint at, right? So be clear, be direct. You can be eloquent, just don't be obfuscating. Don't be trying to state things indirectly and state things through nuance and innuendo. Okay. Now, another piece of advice, I will refer you to a website that gives advice from an MIT admissions director. Actually, he gives advice from George Orwell and Kurt Vonnegut and a writing coach named Gotera. So let me share with you this advice from 8 years ago, actually. But I think it's worth reading. It's still relevant. So this is the URL for this webpage. But if you Google Chris Peterson, how to write a college essay, then this page will come up. And some things I'd like to point out, George Orwell's rules are here, these 6 rules. Notice, never use a long word when a short one will do. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use the passive when you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word, if you could think of an everyday English equivalent. And this would be the advice for those of you out there who are tempted to use the word plethora, right? I am applying to this college for a plethora of reasons. You would never use plethora in an ordinary conversation, so don't use plethora in your personal statements, right? Never use plethora when you can just say many or a lot of. There's the advice by Gotera, you can link to it here. It's advice on writing actually graduate school essays, but the advice would be relevant for college personal statements as well. Let's take a look at these 2 sample paragraphs. I am honored to apply for the Master of Library Science program at the University of Okoboji because as long as I can remember, I've had a love affair with books. Since I was 11, I have known I wanted to be a librarian. Versus, when I was 11, my great aunt Gretchen passed away and left me something that changed my life, a library of about 5,000 books. Some of my best days were spent arranging and reading her books. Since then, I've wanted to be a librarian. So as Gutierrez says in his longer essay, each paragraph was 45 words long and contains substantively the same information, right? The information is the applicant has wanted to be a librarian since she was a young girl. But they are extraordinarily different essays, most strikingly because the former is generic, where the latter is specific. It was a real thing, which happened to a real person, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Do whatever you can to avoid these generic, vague descriptions of events. Specificity is really your friend on a personal statement. You know, specific examples, specific people, specific events. Specificity helps make what you say compelling to the reader. General, vague statements are not compelling. And then this is Vonnegut's 7 rules for writing well. Find a subject you care about, but do not ramble. Keep it simple. Have the guts to cut. Sound like yourself, right? And say what you mean to say. And also pity the readers, meaning, remember, the application reader has hundreds of applications to get through, right? To try to make sure that your application essays are specific, clear, and brief, okay? So let's go back now to the slideshow. There we go. Sorry, bear with me while I bring up the screen share. Okay, so more advice. Speaking of sounding like yourself, you might want to try this exercise, the anonymous personal statement challenge. So when you and your friends have written up your first drafts of your personal statements, print them out, but don't put anyone's names on the drafts. then make copies, mix them up, pass them around, and then try to determine who wrote which personal statement, right? So if your friends cannot pick out your personal statement from the pile of personal statements, then your personal statement is not personal enough. Do you know what I mean? Like if your descriptions are so generic and vague that they can't say, oh, this happened to Maria, this is clearly Maria's essay, then that's not a personal enough personal statement, and you should go revise it. So your friends and family should be able to identify you as the author of that personal statement, even without your name being on it, because they know your story and you're telling a part of your story in your personal statement. That's a successful personal statement. Another exercise you might want to try is the list of descriptors that you will never use, right? So here's the weird part of this exercise. These descriptors, meaning adjectives or descriptive phrases, are precisely what you want your readers to know about you. For example, just hypothetically, I'm an animal lover, I'm a future biochemist, and I'm really hardworking, right? So the trick will be, you should tell stories that will inexorably force the reader to conclude these qualities and descriptions about you without you ever telling your reader, I am an animal lover, a future biochemist, and I am very hardworking, okay? So especially don't say you're very hardworking, because everyone says that. Instead, recount an anecdote, right? A short story that will force your reader to conclude that you are in fact hardworking. So this is that advice that English teachers often give, which is show, don't tell, right? Don't tell your reader you're hardworking. Show your reader that you are by telling a story that forces your reader to draw that conclusion about you, okay? So make a list of all the things, the qualities, the descriptions, the characteristics about you that you want your college application readers to know about you, and then never use those words themselves in the personal statements. Instead, think about stories that illustrate and amplify those descriptions of you, okay? So the list of descriptors that you will never use are actually the descriptions that you want them to know about you, but you just don't use them. You tell stories to force people to draw those conclusions instead. Okay. Also, general advice. In your early drafts, just start writing. Your priority is to put ideas down on the page. It's okay if the writing isn't polished or even all that coherent, because these are your early drafts. You're gonna revise them later. Don't worry about, well, it's not perfect prose, or, you know, this is an incomplete sentence, or there's better words to use to describe this. All that can be fixed later in the revising stage, okay? You want to put ideas on the page in the early drafts. That's the most important thing. Put all the ideas you might use on the page. And you should also overwrite for the early drafts. You can always, it's easier to cut words out later than add words in later. So just put ideas down. Whether they're great ideas or not so great ideas doesn't matter. More importantly, put everything down that you think you might consider using in your personal statements and have them on the page for the early drafts, okay? And then of course, revise, revise, revise. All right. Let's talk about some common mistakes and cliche topics to avoid. Now, so notice that I didn't say never ever write about these. I said avoid. There's always exceptions to the rule. You know, maybe a cliche topic is actually not cliche for you because your story is actually quite interesting. But in general, avoid these common mistakes and cliche topics. And I have to apologize. This is the part of the presentation where I sound the most like a cranky, jaded application reader who's had to read tens of thousands of personal statements. So apologies in advance for the upcoming negativity. It's better that you hear it from me than you make these mistakes on your actual personal statements and annoy an actual college application reader for the college you're applying to, right? So here we go. We begin with, unless it's a truly extraordinary tale. avoid writing about how you coped during the COVID-19 pandemic. So here's the thing. It's challenging for you, but it's challenging for everyone, right? I mean, again, everyone's going through a hard time right now. And remember your goal, stand out in a good way from the tens of thousands of other people applying to the same school. If you write about how you rose to the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic, you will probably be one of 50 COVID-19 pandemics in that reader's pile of applications. I have a feeling there's going to be this onslaught of COVID-19 personal statements coming for the class of 2021 and also the class of 2022. Don't be one of 50 COVID-19 pandemic personal statements, okay? So again, unless it's a truly extraordinary tale, unless there is significant hardship that you've overcome, you know, like for example, you have no Wi-Fi at home, you went to get, you started an online, I don't know, an online tech support business to make money during COVID-19, and you use that money to, you know, online phone tech support to pay for high-speed Wi-Fi, high-speed internet access for your household. That's great. That's a great story. That kind of story is extraordinary. But if it's just a regular, here's how I cope with COVID-19, I would advise against it, okay? Okay, similarly, if you or your parents are immigrants, avoid writing about your family's immigration story. Why? Because it'll probably sound like everyone else's immigration story. So of the 10,000 personal statements that I've read so far, I have yet to read the immigrant story essay in which the applicant said, my parents came to America to provide me with a worse education and fewer opportunities than were available in the old country, right? Everyone comes to the US for the same reasons, better education, better opportunities. Now, unless your immigration story is significantly different from everyone else's, I would recommend avoiding writing about it because, again, your goal is to sound different from everyone else, not sound the same as everyone else, okay? Again, if there was significant hardship as part of the immigration story, then sure, write about the significant hardship. But if the takeaway from your family's immigration story is just, we came for better opportunities, everyone did as well. Everyone else did as well. So I would consider something else, writing about something else. So sorry, see, I told you I'm sounding cranky and jaded, but I've read enough of these that I'm like, oh God, you know, like it's sounding like everyone else's stories. So again, better that I tell you to avoid this than you learn the hard way. Also avoid the sports story, the music recital story, and the tribute to a grandparent or parent. There are two versions of the music recital story. I practiced really hard. The day the recital came, I played really well and I learned a life lesson. Or I practiced really hard. The day the recital came, I played really terribly and I learned a life lesson. Okay, so if your music recital story is significantly different from either of those two templates, then great, go for it. But if that's what you're going to write about, you will be one of 50 music recital stories in that one pile of applications, okay? All right. Also avoid extreme language, most, worst, best, hardest, right? Life is nuanced and your writing should reflect that nuance. Don't tell your application reader, for example, that coaching middle school students in speech and debate was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? I mean, first of all, is it really? Is that factually accurate? And secondly, try something more nuanced, like, you know, I found coaching middle school students in speech and debate to be extremely gratifying and surprisingly challenging. You know, so not the best thing that ever happened to me, not the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, right? So, you know, life is nuanced. Your writing should reflect that nuance as well. Okay, avoid the long-winded introduction that sets the scene for your reader. This is sometimes erroneously referred to as a hook. And here's the thing. I'm going to stop sharing right now. I have another poll for you. Why should I not write a hook? So go for it, make your selection or selections. I think you can do multiple choice, right? Multiple options. Oh, where can you access the polls? It should have showed up on your screen. It should be a pop-up window in your screen in Zoom. If you're calling in, then you obviously won't be able to see the poll because it's only something that you can view on a tablet or laptop or desktop computer, or a smartphone if you have the Zoom app. Okay, so let's end the poll. Here are the results of the poll. The answer for why should I not write a hook is actually all of these are true. So many people are writing hooks, they no longer help you stand out. Personal statements have a word limit. It's not a good idea to waste words on an opening hook. Application readers are super busy with piles of apps to get through and will appreciate applicants who get to the talking points quickly. And UC admissions offices have specifically asked counselors to tell their students, don't write hooks, right? The UC admissions offices have said, please stop writing catchy opening hooks, just get to the point, right? So let me, hold on a second, let me share the screen again. So, you know, if I asked you what time it is, you would not say time. Time has puzzled humans for centuries. The very concept of time has confounded such great minds as Einstein and Aristotle. It's 7:38. No, you would just say it's 7:38, right? So the same principle should apply to answering personal statement prompts. Start with answering the question, right? You have a limited number of words, and so there's one answer. One question that's come in, and it's how long is the personal statement? Does it vary by application? The UC personal statement is a series. You'll write a series of 4 personal statements that are 350 words each, maximum. So all in all, 1,400 words, but for each question, only 350 words to answer each prompt for the UC application. For the common application, you'll write 1 personal statement essay with a maximum of 650 words. Okay, so 650 words for the common app personal statement, 4 350-word personal statements for the UC application. The Cal State application has no personal statements. It's a personal statement-free application for Cal State. Now, that sounds like a lot, 650 words or 350 words might sound like a lot. It's not. Do not waste your words. Do not waste the word count by saying time. Time has puzzled humans for centuries, right? If you're going to write about how you were the lead in your school's musical, don't set the scene for your audience, for your reader. Don't say, you know, the stage was black, the audience was hushed. I could hear my fellow actors fidgeting nervously backstage while we waited for the opening strains of, of My Fair Lady to start up. Just say, you know, I was honored to be chosen as the lead in My Fair Lady, which was at once terrifying and gratifying, right? So notice that there's a little bit of a hook there. There's a teaser there, right? Oh, why is it terrifying and gratifying? That's fine. So I'm not saying don't get your reader interested in what you have to say later in your personal statement. I'm saying avoid the lengthy opening hooks, the long-winded opening hooks. Just don't do it. Don't do the long-winded opening hooks. Okay? All right. Okay. Avoid summarizing in prose what is already stated elsewhere in your application, like your transcript or your activities list. You know what? Remember that these personal statements are not read in isolation. I will know how many AP classes you took in junior year. You don't have to tell me. I took 4 AP classes in junior year because I'll see it in the transcript. So again, don't waste precious space. Rather, don't use up precious words for information that I can get elsewhere on the application. No need to say, I attend Lowell High School. I know that, from other parts of the application. So word count is a precious commodity on the personal statement. Do not waste words by being redundant and stating what is found elsewhere on the application. What is found elsewhere? Your GPA, weighted and unweighted, your AP scores, your SAT or ACT scores, your subject test scores, the classes you took, the activities you're involved in, all of that is found elsewhere, right? So avoid restating in prose form what is already stated elsewhere on your application. Okay, there is a myth in college admissions that in my personal statements, I need to show that I've lived a life full of hardship and tragedy in order to gain admission to a highly selective college, right? Please feel pity for me. My life is very hard. Therefore, you should let me into your college. It doesn't work that way, right? The reality, first of all, is most students who get into highly selective colleges, thankfully, did not lead lives full of tragedy and hardship. So there's no need to manufacture tragedy and hardship on your personal statements if it didn't really happen to you. If there's no tragedy, it's fine if your life is tragedy-free. That's okay. That's a good thing. I'm happy for you. You don't need to manufacture tragedy in order to make a personal statement compelling, okay? However, if you did, in fact, face significant challenges in 9th through 12th grades, then you should tell us about it. Readers of your application want to get the fullest context of your situation so that they can better evaluate your academic and personal accomplishments in the fullest context possible. So to that end, more information is better than less on the college application. But make sure the hardship was significant and relevant in high school years, right? Something that happened to you in 3rd grade, if it didn't affect your 9th through 12th grade years, I would not write about it, significant challenges. But you should write about it. And here's how you should write about it. Here's how to talk about hardships and challenges. Do you say I'm a victim? No, of course not, right? You never want to say I'm a victim. You never want to say, please pity me and therefore let me into your school. Not I'm a victim, but I'm a victor, right? Here's what I've accomplished. Explaining, not complaining. When you're talking about hardships, explaining, not complaining. Also, don't make the hardship or the challenge the focus of your discussion. Don't lead with the hardship or challenge. Focus instead on the accomplishments that you achieved despite the hardship. Mention the hardships and challenges in passing. So the focus of the essay should be, look at all the cool things that I did. And oh, by the way, I did them even though I was hospitalized for a month in sophomore year with a broken femur, or whatever, right? So talk through the hardship, not about the hardship, if that makes sense. Also, when you're talking about hardships, understated, not exaggerated is the way to go. I've read compelling personal statements where the student's parent, the mother passed away. And I didn't know about it until like the third paragraph, because she didn't lead with my mom passed away in my junior year. She led with, I want to be a oncologist. I find the human body fascinating. And yes, and a major impetus for me wanting to be an oncologist was my mom passed away from cancer in my junior year. I'm like, holy crap. So that, even something like that can be super effective if you talk through the hardship, not about it, right? If you mention it in passing along the way to talking about goals, aspirations, accomplishments, all right? Also, utilize the additional comments section on the UC application and the common application. It's a handy alternative to the personal statements. So if you want to talk about hardships and challenges, oftentimes you don't need to necessarily make them the focus of a personal statement or even mention it in a personal statement in passing. You can often mention them just in the additional comments section. On the UC application, you get 500 words for additional comments. And there's an additional comment section to explain your academic record. If there's anything weird about your academic record, and you get 500 characters to explain your academic record. On the common application, you get 500 words to talk about whatever that you need to talk about. So some people who have like learning disabilities will just mention it in additional comments instead of making it the subject of a personal statement. So utilize additional comments, which is this free form, open-ended discussion box for whatever you want to talk about. It can include hardships and challenges. There's a question that came in, what about people who lie to generate tragedy in their personal statements? Don't lie. That's a terrible thing to do. Furthermore, a non-trivial percentage of applications are audited for factual accuracy. So a proportion of applications will just be selected at random. And some applicants will be asked to provide evidence or documentation that what they said in the personal statements or in the college application activities list or whatever is accurate and correct. So there's a chance that you might be one of those people who just gets randomly audited for veracity. And if you're caught in a lie, what do you think that's going to do to your chances of getting into that college? You're not going to get in. Or if you are in, and they will just rescind your acceptance because you just lied to the college on your application. Okay, so do not lie on the college application. Do some people lie? Sure. Is it fair that they are lying and maybe don't get audited? No, it's not fair. But worry about what you can worry about, right? Worry about your application, not everyone else's. Okay, so now let's look at the actual prompts on the UC and the common applications. For UC, the fall 2020 application prompts are the same as last year. You are given 8 prompts and you're asked to write about 4. You pick 4 to write about. 350 words max per personal statement per essay. Engineering applicants, if you are applying to be an engineering major for the University of California, then you should make sure that at least one of your personal statements talks about why you want to be an engineer and why you're qualified. I say indirectly because you don't want to say, I'm a qualified applicant for UC Davis or for the UC engineering majors. Again, instead tell your reader stories that will force the reader to conclude, oh, he or she is a super qualified person for engineering. Okay, so engineering applicants, make sure that you spend at least one of your personal statements talking about why you want to be an engineer, what kind of engineer you want to be, and why you'd be a good one. So once again, I'm going to stop this share here and go to a website, and I'll share this with you now. So this web page here has the list of the 8 prompts for the University of California application. I will point out that prompt number 8 is basically make up your own prompt. If you can't find some kind of response to the previous 7 prompts, then you can make up your own. But let's take a look briefly at the 7 pre-written personal statement prompts. By the way, UC likes to call them personal insight questions instead of personal statements. It's the same thing. Personal insight questions, personal statements, college application essays, all the same thing. So prompt number 1, leadership. Describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. UC does a pretty good job with this things to consider. This portion is actually really helpful in helping you think through how to respond to these prompts. And notice that leadership is more than just a title. It can be being a mentor, being in charge of a task, taking a lead role in organizing an event or a project. Leadership does not necessarily mean you're captain or president of a team or a school organization. Okay, it's more than just a title. Prompt 2 is about your creative side. And creativity does not just mean artistic creativity. It can be problem solving, innovative thinking, as well as artistically creative. Okay, so those are all things to consider for prompt number 2. UC prompt number 3, what is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed it and demonstrated that talent over time? UC prompt number 4, how have you taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced? Here's where I saw the personal statement that said I got a C. I started with a C in AP Bio and ended up with an A. Again, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to strive for A's. I would not use this prompt to answer. I would not answer this prompt with a story about how you worked really hard to study for a test and got an A. That's not a significant educational barrier. Significant educational barrier would be something like, my school offers 0 AP classes, so I went to City College to take advanced courses. Obviously, this doesn't apply to Lowell, which has approximately a quintillion AP courses. So that's just a hypothetical of an educational barrier that is significant. Prompt number 5 is describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. Also answer how the challenges affect your academic achievement. Again, don't manufacture tragedy and hardship if you don't have tragedy and hardship in your life. It's okay not to answer UC prompt number 5. It's totally fine. Number 6, think about an academic subject that inspires you. How have you furthered this interest inside and outside the classroom? Number 7, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? And number 8, again, open-ended. Okay, so these are the 8 UC prompts, personal insight questions, okay? All right, so let me go to, let me share again. The slide deck, and we'll go on to the common application, which, as you know, is the application for private schools. It's the same, the prompts for the personal statement will be the same as last year, but Common App does have a new spanking new logo. I kind of like it better than the old one. You'll have 7 prompts, but again, prompt number 7 is make up your own prompt. So there's really 6 pre-written prompts, and then the 7th one is make up your own. And as I already mentioned, 650 word max, 1 personal statement. So let's take a look at the 7 common application prompts. And again, they're the same as last year. So let me share with you this screen. Again, don't worry about 2019. They've already stated that it's going to be the same as last year. So Common App prompt number 1. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application will be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. Number 2, lessons we encounter from obstacles. Recount a time when you face a challenge, setback, or failure. The last sentence is actually the most important sentence. How did it affect you and what did you learn from the experience? Don't just talk about the setback. You need to talk about how you overcame the setback. Don't just talk about the challenge. You need to talk about how you overcame the challenge, okay? Number 3, reflect on a time when you questioned a challenge or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? Number 4, describe a problem you solved or a problem you'd like to solve. It could be an intellectual challenge, a research query, an ethical dilemma, anything that is of personal importance no matter the scale. Explain the significance to you and what steps you took to, or could be taken to identify a solution. Common App number 5, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself and others. Number 6, describe a topic, idea, or concept that you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So notice that there is some overlap between the UC prompts and the common application prompts, right? You could certainly repurpose a UC personal insight essay for a common application essay and vice versa. For example, Common App number 6 is essentially what's your favorite academic subject, right? Which is also asked on the UC personal statement, asked on the UC application as well as one of the personal insight questions. So you can and should repurpose Common App personal statements for UC and vice versa. Obviously, they're different lengths, so you'll have to do it with modification, but it just makes sense to not reinvent the wheel every single time you write a personal statement. So let's go back now to the keynote presentation, and my advice, now that you've seen the prompts, my advice for you is for both the UC and common applications, start with what you want to tell the colleges about yourself, and then find the prompt that fits your topic. So don't read the prompts and then ask yourself, which one will you answer? Instead, figure out what it is that you want to tell the college, and then figure out which prompt most easily allows you to tell that story or to bring up those talking points, okay? So, so go ahead and start with what you want to tell a college, and then find a prompt that fits. If you need to read the prompts as a brainstorming exercise to get some ideas bouncing around your head, then yeah, absolutely do that, go for it. But I would prioritize what you want to say over what they want you to say. You know what I mean? There's a question that came in: how closely does your essay have to address the prompt? Does it need to be related exactly to the prompt? I can tell you that, at least for Berkeley, applicants were given a lot of leeway, a lot of latitude in how to answer these prompts. So in other words, I would not say, she only indirectly told me what her favorite subject is. I'm going to downgrade this personal statement, or I'm going to downgrade her application because she was being indirect in responding to the prompt. As long as it's related in some meaningful way to the prompt, then that's fine. Okay, so you do get some leeway. I would avoid, I forgot to make this as an official slide. I would avoid, and I'm putting my cranky, jaded application reader hat on. I would avoid responding to prompts in a gimmicky way. So one personal statement that I found so annoying that I still remember to this day. I stopped reading applications like 5 years ago, but I still remember to this day. It was so like too cutesy. It was a recipe. Like, she put the list of ingredients, 2 cups of hard work 1 tablespoon of intellectual curiosity, you know, 3/4 cups of spunk, and then like she wrote instructions on how to cook herself, basically, how to like a recipe for, you know, and then at the end of it, poof, you know, here, it's me. It was so like annoyingly cutesy that I just it really turned me off. So avoid the gimmicky responses to prompts. There was one that was written, like one free verse poem that was written as is not terribly effective. How about this? If the school you're applying to is a total long shot, then yeah, go for it, right? But I mean, but remember the personal statement for the common application goes to all the private schools you apply to. The personal insight questions you answer on the UC application goes to all the UC campuses you apply to. So, you know, I would avoid those gimmicky personal statement formats. Okay. All right. Moving on then. So we got about half an hour left, and then we'll go to questions and answers. Actually, probably less than half an hour, and we'll go to Q&A. I hope you're getting up and stretching. I hope you're going to the fridge and getting something to eat and coming back. Please feel free to get up and stretch and come back if you want to. Obviously, use the bathroom if you need to. You don't have to hold it. So let's kind of wrap it up with how to come up with topics for personal statements. There are, so I guess I would say there's 4 kind of foundational starting questions you can ask yourself. And the answers to those 4 foundational questions often serve as good material for personal statements. But first, let me give you, this is just for me, out of my curiosity. I'm just curious, for you students out there, have you faced and have you overcome a significant academic or life challenge in high school that you think will be the topic for one of your personal statements? I'm just curious to know. You know, again, I pointed out that most of us don't have lead lives of hardship and tragedy. But I'm just curious to know, for those of you in this webinar right now tonight, have you faced a personal obstacle that you think is significant enough that you'll want to write about it on a personal statement? So about 65% have voted so far. I'll give it a little more time. Okay, so about 80% of you have voted so far, and the results are 2/3 of you, you're not going to be bringing up personal tragedies and hardships, significant challenges that you've overcome, and then 1/3 of you, yes, you will be talking about, or you think you'll be talking about a personal or a life challenge in your personal statement. So that's about what I expected. You know, 1/3 yes, significant hardship or challenge, and 2/3 no. That's about right. Okay, so so I mentioned 4 kind of foundational questions that you can ask yourself, and the answer is often talking points for your personal statements. The first one we'll consider is, what was my proudest accomplishment in high school? 9th through 12th grades, what was my proudest accomplishment? So notice I said high school, not middle school, right? We were all superstars in middle school. And middle school accomplishments get you into high school. High school accomplishments get you into college. If you write about something that you did that was great in 7th grade for your college application, then that kind of raises a red flag to me. Like, didn't anything great happen to you in 9th through 12th grades, right? So that why do you have to write about 7th grade when you're applying to high school and that you're in 12th grade 5 years later, you know? So, but if there is, think about what your proudest accomplishment is in 9th through 12th grades. The answer to that is often a good talking point for a personal statement. Another kind of foundational question you can ask is, what was my most meaningful activity in high school? So presumably you guys are, I mean, obviously not now during the lockdown, the quarantine for COVID-19, but presumably in previous semesters, you guys have been involved in activities at school or in your church or community centers or whatever. There are things you do outside the classroom, right? And for many of you, you have, you've spent significant hours doing that activity, right? Robotics team, for example, that's a lot of hours to build robots and have them perform these tasks for like the first robotics competition, things like that. So ask yourself, what was my most meaningful activity in high school? It doesn't necessarily have to be what you spent the most time doing, but for you, what was the most meaningful thing? There are dozens, if not hundreds of things you could have done in your spare time. You chose this. Why? Why did you choose that? Why did you spend so much time doing that? Why was it meaningful to you? Why was it important to you? Okay. So a third question you can ask yourself, and as you saw from the UC prompts, this is actually a prompt on the UC application for the personal insight questions. What was the most significant challenge that I've overcome in high school? Again, high school, not 5th grade, right? Not 3rd grade, unless whatever happened in 5th or 3rd grade still has resonance today. It still has affected your high school experience. So in 5th grade, I was diagnosed with severe dyslexia. That affects my academic learning in high school. That's fine, right? That's a significant challenge that started in 5th grade, but continues to have relevance at the present moment. Most challenges will be, specific to the 9th through 12th grade years. What was the most significant one for you? And how did you overcome it? Notice that I'm presupposing that you've overcome it. If it's a continuing problem, maybe you shouldn't write about it. If you haven't addressed the challenge or haven't, so for example, I've read personal statements about students struggling with bulimia. They don't talk about how they've overcome it. They're still battling bulimia. That's a problem because colleges generally don't want to admit students who are presently struggling with an eating disorder or anxiety or depression. If you have not figured out ways to accommodate or overcome those psychological disorders and those conditions, it's going to be very challenging to get into a school, because the last thing schools want is to admit you when you're still struggling with depression and then add to your depression or your anxiety, because college can be stressful in your first year especially, and they don't want to take students with challenges that are still ongoing that they haven't learned how to cope with yet, right? So I'm presupposing that you've overcome the challenge if you're going to write about it. If you haven't, recommend against writing about it. And the fourth question is sort of the most nebulous, and that is, what are the core values that define me? Okay, so notice that I didn't write, one of the foundational questions is not, what is my worldview or philosophy on life? It's not that those are not important questions to answer for yourself. It's important for you to know what your worldview and philosophy on life is for yourself, but it's just that it's very difficult for a fully grown adult, let alone a 17 or 18-year-old, to write a meaningful essay answering what is my worldview or my philosophy on life. So instead of talking about those like abstractions, it's better to focus on telling your readers, why did you do the things that you did? Why did you spend so much time doing robotics? Why is this your proudest accomplishment in high school? Okay. And then in terms of core values that define me, what are the activities that you've done? What are the ways that you've expressed those core values? And so core values is kind of again, a nebulous term. So my friend Ethan Sawyer who's also known as the college essay guy, came up with a values list. And so what you want to do is, so you can Google college essay guy values exercise, and you'll get this. You can print out this PDF. The exercise is in figuring out what are your core values. Look through this list, check off 10 values that really define who you are. Then once you get your 10, whittle it down to your top 5. Once you've got your 5, whittle it down to your top 3. And then once you've got your 3, ask yourself, what's the one most important of those 3? Okay, so, and then write about that remaining core value. Now, when you write about it, so like, for example, ecological awareness, that's just one that I'm pulling off of the rightmost column. Ecological awareness ends up being my most important core value. Don't say, I'm an ecologically aware person, right? Instead, tell stories about how you live that value, how you express the notion that ecological awareness is super important to you. How did you live that? What did you do to express that, right? Tell stories that illustrate your core values. Don't say, my core value is ecological awareness. Good writers are not that heavy-handed. Good writers will force the reader to conclude, oh, wow, she's really into ecological awareness because you've told a story so well and so compellingly that the writer will conclude that about you, okay? Now, the values worksheet says, what do I value on the top? But here's the thing though, what is easy? What do I value is easy. What did you do in high school is easy. Like, describing what you did is fairly straightforward. I did robotics. Here's what I did. I spent this many hours doing this, and I was in charge of programming, and I learned, I learned how to program Arduinos so I could, so my team could be part of this competition. What you did is easy, but why and how is harder. But why and how, the answers to the why and the how questions is exactly what makes a compelling personal statement. Why did you spend so much time, learning how to program Arduinos, right? How did your involvement affect your friends, family, school, or community, right? How, describing what you did, fairly straightforward. Why and how is harder to answer, but you must answer the why and the how questions in order to make a compelling personal statement. Okay, wrapping up here. So try to paint a portrait with your application. Your personal statement is one of your paintbrushes. Okay, so imagine that these are quotes from admissions officers meeting to decide on applications. These students, hypothetical students, have successfully differentiated themselves from the rest of the crowd. So, oh yeah, Jason, he's the motorcycle racer from San Francisco who also plays piano, right? Or, I'd like to go to bat for Natasha. She's a self-taught website coder who supported herself through high school after her father gambled away her savings, her college savings. Or next application to consider is Trisha. She's the student body vice president who really wants to be a veterinarian. Yeah, so why are these successful? Why are these applicants successful? They're successful because they've created an identity for themselves through their applications and their personal statements, right? They're not part of some undifferentiated mass of a stack of applications to that school, to that college or university. They have differentiated themselves from the rest of the crowd with these descriptions of themselves, these descriptors, so that they're not just some anonymous, faceless GPA and test score. They've individuated themselves from everyone else. Okay, so generally, after reading the entire application, and that is reading the biographical data data about the student, about the family's situation, about the school. We also get school data, ratio of students to teachers and things like that. API score of the school, for example. After we look over the transcripts, the classes you took, whether they were a lot of advanced courses or all regular level courses, the grades you got in the classes, test scores, SAT or ACT, subject test, AP scores. After we look at your activities list and the number of hours you spent on each activity per week and how many weeks out of the year you were involved in that activity, and reading the descriptions of the activities, and then wrapping it up with the personal statements, reading the personal statement essays that you wrote. After all of that, I will generally ask myself one key question, and that is, did this student maximize his or her educational and life opportunities? Right? Did this student maximize his or her educational and life opportunities? Now, hopefully, you presented yourself on your college application and in your personal statements in such a way that the readers of the application will conclude that, yes, she did or he did. He really made the most of the opportunities that came his way, or she made the most of the opportunities that came her way. All right. So, with that, I will now bring up the slide. So here's the slide with the web address, with the Google form to sign up for the free 1 hour college essay editing. Remember, you have to be a junior. This is for the class of 2021 only, and the first 100 students that sign up will get appointments. And so it's broken up into two 30-minute sessions. Session 1 is for brainstorming, and session 2 is to edit drafts. At least that's the idea. So I would, if I were you and you want to avail of the free 1 hour, I would go now to this website and fill out the form and reserve your place in line. This is provided through the generosity of the Lowell Parent Teacher Student Association, the PTSA. The PTSA is paying for the essay editing hours that you students will receive. So make sure to thank the board for their generosity. And regarding session 1, the brainstorming personal statement, you'll need to bring something to that. You'll need to prepare even for session 1. When you come to session 1, we're going to ask that you bring your resume, your academic resume, which includes your academic accomplishments and your extracurricular activities and personal accomplishments as well. Because, as I had mentioned in the presentation tonight, one of the go-to sources for what to write about for a personal statement is your activities list. It is your resume. Like, what have you done, right? A personal statement is a very good place to amplify and elaborate on why you did the things you did in high school, what you got out of it, how you affected others through your involvement with Model UN or speech and debate or Heart in Motion or whatever, right? You do need to bring something to the first session, even if it's just a brainstorming session. And that's your resume. So you and your teacher have something to look over, and you can bounce ideas about what to write about off of each other based on the document, the resume. Now, some of you will bring drafts to the first session, which is totally fine. I would just caution you to be prepared for the possibility that your teacher will read it and say, you know what, this is just not going to work. Again, it's fine if you bring drafts, just don't be upset if the teacher tells you it's not really going to work. It's cliche, or this is really not that relevant to, to the personal statement prompts. It's better we tell you than you turn in something bad on an actual live college application, okay? Secondly, another point is, none of us will write these essays for you. You need to write them. You need to write the drafts, and we will just give you editorial advice. But none of us will actually write anything for you. These are your words, and if you struggle with writing, then we'll give you some advice on how to become a better writer. But really, it's important that you are the one that these words are yours and not your editors, not your teachers, okay, or your counselor's words. All right, so with that, we can go to the questions and answers. Let me look through the list. There's a lot of questions about, can you view this recorded meeting again? I will see. I'll try to. Yeah, I think so. I'll try to post it on the Elite Prep YouTube channel. I'm not the person in charge of the YouTube channel, so I'll have to ask him if I can post this. So yeah, probably. So look for the Elite Prep YouTube channel, and it'll probably be up in a couple of days. Okay. And then questions have come in. So I'm going to move off of this slide now, just to warn you. So if you're still, take a screenshot or whatever of the web address so you can register, okay? And remember, juniors only, 1 hour free. Okay, so for Q&A, first of all, that's my email address, and that's Ms. Aguirre's email address. We are available through email, but we're also available right now. So I'm going to unmute Ms. Aguirre, or if Ms. Aguirre wants to unmute herself. And then I'm going to go to the questions that have been submitted so far on the Q&A box. But Ms. Aguirre, do you want to? Are there any questions you want to handle?
I've answered a few of them. I did read one about writing about a hardship that might feel too personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tricky one because you have to be ready to write about this. And sometimes writing about something that has occurred and you're not ready, it's going to bring up a lot of different emotions. So you have to ask yourself that question before, and maybe writing the essay and reading it yourself before deciding whether you're going to let somebody read it. But we don't want something that you're not ready to write about to cause you more harm. So maybe just putting it on paper, but the essay should be personal. So it's a fine balance where if a college needs to know about something that has occurred in your life and something that you have overcome in order to make a decision whether to admit you, it is important that this would be the place for you to write about it because you have overcome a situation. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, and also some further advice I would give is I know that parents especially kind of don't want their kids to talk about, to air the family's dirty laundry or to talk to a stranger about the family's problems. You know, the thing is, the college application is not the place to hide that kind of information because, as I said, the purpose of the personal statement is to provide the fullest context possible to allow readers of the applications to judge the student's personal and academic accomplishments. So, you know, Dad's business went bankrupt in sophomore year, and we had a lot of financial problems in my sophomore year. That kind of information really should be shared on a personal statement, even though it's difficult and, you know, and undoubtedly your parents would be embarrassed to share that information. Keep in mind that it is confidential. It's not like the schools are going to share that information with the rest of the freshman class. It's just, you know, for the application readers to know and to judge the fuller context using that information. So if your family did struggle in some way in your high school years, then I believe, my opinion, you should share that information, as difficult as it is. But as Ms. Aguirre says, if you're not ready to, it might not be a good idea. But if you are, mentally prepared to talk about those challenges, then overcoming a challenge is always a good story to tell, right? The hero's journey is always the hero's overcoming some kind of challenge, some kind of hardship and challenge. It's the same sort of literary truth is true of personal statements. Overcoming challenges is also, besides a good epic tale, is also a good personal statement. So there's one question: is it better to address the prompt and relate it to the major you're applying to as well? So should your personal statements talk about your intended majors? It can, yeah, absolutely. Does it have to? No, it doesn't have to. First of all, most majors do not admit freshmen into the major. Most majors you cannot join until after you've taken 2 years of college classes. So really, in most cases, the major you indicate on your college application is an expression of interest. When after 2 years of college, this is what I plan on majoring in, is really what you're saying. For example, there's no such thing as a freshman biology major. Biology is one of those majors that you don't join until after you've taken 2 years of college coursework, and then you join in your third year. So is it helpful to talk about how you interned at the Academy of Sciences and you were giving tours about the rainforest, showing that you're really interested in biology and biomes and things like that? Absolutely, it's helpful. Yes, absolutely. But what I want to assure you is, if you check off the biology major on the college application, you don't have to write a story about how you're a biology nerd in your personal statements, right? If there's some other compelling story you want to tell instead of how you want to be a biology major, then tell that compelling story. It does not have to necessarily be tied to your intended major, okay? Other questions that let's see. There's one question: would I recommend basing up the personal statement on an extracurricular activity listed on the activities list or not listed? If it's important enough to you that you want to write about it, it should be on your activities list. The UC application allows for 20 activities, and the common application allows for 10. Now, if you are going to write about an activity, then presumably it was important enough and meaningful enough to you that you should list it on the list. So to my mind, there's no reason to write about an activity that does not appear on the list. If you're going to write about it, by definition, it should be on your activities list.
There's a question about supplemental questions.
Good question.
For those of you that might not know this, on the Common App essay, you have one essay to choose 650 words max, but some of the colleges will ask you shorter essay questions that are very unique to those schools, and they call this supplemental essays. They vary from school to school, but they're usually tend to be very unique, like let's just say, for example, USC, like why USC? So that's very unique to those. Some schools will have 2 supplemental questions. Some could have 4 or 5, and they're a lot shorter. They are also just as important as the main essay. So you should take your time. I notice a lot of students tend to put these off really close to when they're ready to submit. And because of that, not as strong, but you really want to put as much time as you can on those supplemental questions also. Yeah,
and some advice that I always give about supplemental essays If you're, here's the kiss of death on a supplemental essay. I want to attend blank school because the faculty is top notch. I know I'll learn a lot from my fellow students, and it'll really prepare me well for life and for graduate school later. Why is that the kiss of death? That could be any school, right? It's so your reasons for wanting to go to that school are so general that they're actually applicable to more than just that school. So for why do you want to go to our school essays, I recommend being very, very specific, talking about education abroad opportunities that are only available at that particular campus, talking about student organizations that only exist at that campus. Or rather, student organizations that exist at that campus that you specifically are interested in joining because of X, Y, or Z, right? So specificity is the key to a successful, why do you want to go to our school essay? If it sounds like, if what you're saying sounds like it could apply to some other school, I would try to revise it. What are brief examples of some extraordinary personal statements that you have read? Another question we got was, where can I find samples of good personal statements? Here's the thing. If you look on like Amazon, you can probably find a book that's like 50 outstanding Ivy League personal statements, 20 Harvard essays that got students in. Or you can find an article, a news article on the web saying, here's the personal statement that got this girl into 8 Ivy League schools. That's great for them. I don't recommend reading them because those weren't your experiences, right? I mean, the personal statement that matters the most is the one that you generate, not the one that someone else wrote. And frankly, that's not your writing style either, right? I mean, remember what we said, you should sound like you. The tone you want is a conversation you're having with an intelligent adult, right? But it's a conversation, it's conversational tone. You're not writing, Ulysses by James Joyce, right? It's not a performance art piece. It's not a poetry slam. It's a conversation. So you should sound like yourself, and whatever writing style these other people had who got into Harvard and Yale, great, that's their writing style, that's not yours. So just make sure you sound like yourself. Those activities that they talk about, those were their activities, not yours. So I don't recommend buying these books that say, look at these 50 successful personal statements for Harvard or Yale. Just write a compelling story for your experience, okay?
Here's one. There's a couple about length in the essay. You obviously can't go over the word limit. If you're at the limit, I wouldn't, as long as you answer the prompt completely, if it's short and sweet, it's fine. As long as it just answers the prompt fully. So you don't feel, you're not gonna get extra points for getting right to 650 words. But if there was it's a shorter essay, but it didn't really quite feel complete, or that you put enough time into it, that isn't really good either. So it's kind of tricky also.
There is a question that came in on, is the one-on-one coaching session through video call? Yes, it's entirely video call and sharing Google Docs. So you'll share a Google Doc of your academic resume, and you'll share the drafts of your personal statements with your college essay editor. So you guys can edit simultaneously. The editor can give comments on Google Docs. Now, I'm not quite sure how much you can get through in 30 minutes. I don't know if you can get through 4 UC prompts in 30 minutes. You can certainly get through 1 common application prompt in 30 minutes. Also, if you're thinking of applying early admissions, I would work on the common application first before the UC application. So if you are considering applying early to a private school, then spend the 1 hour working on Common App. Everyone else who's applying regular admissions to private schools, the UC deadline will be your first deadline. So I would work on the UC apps, personal insight questions first.
There's one, anything about GPA and SAT scores for any schools. On their website, they have average for every year about the average students that got admitted with what SATs and GPAs. An average is an average. That means most students had that GPA that got admitted, but there's some that were above that GPA and some that were below. Most schools do like a comprehensive review, so there's other factors other than GPA and SAT score that contribute to whether a student gets admitted. So that's a really hard question to answer. But if your GPA is really far away from that average, you also have to be realistic of whether that's a school that you have a real good chance of being admitted to. But I tend to try not to, I just tell a student, oh, there's no way you're gonna be admitted with that GPA and SAT score. I just help students add other schools that they're also considering applying to that might fit more with what their scores are.
Yeah, and actually, I admire this person's persistence, whether it's a parent or a student who kept asking about. But 2.3 is technically below the minimum GPA to apply to the UC system. You need a minimum cap weighted GPA of 3.0 to even to qualify for the UC application. So 2.3 is well below the minimum qualifying GPA. It's true, all the UC schools do admit by exception, but that's usually like you're an athlete, you know? And so they will admit you by exception because you're a football star or something like that. There's a question about what percentage is the personal statement weighted in the comprehensive review. It's really hard to fix a percentage to that, to the importance of the personal statement. It's important. As I said in an earlier slide, I don't think it's more important than your academic profile, although if you're a borderline, you know, like a maybe student for that school, then a strong personal statement can tip you over from maybe into a yes, as it did with that student I was talking about this year. But it's hard to say like it's 50% of the decision. That's a hard, actually effectively an impossible question to answer. It's important. Is it more important than grades and test scores? No, I don't think so. I think it's still primarily grades and test scores that they look at first in terms of your academic profile. But can a good personal statement help? Absolutely. Will a brilliant personal statement mean that the person with a 2.33 will be admitted to UC Davis because Davis loves the personal statement so much they'll say Will Smith is a student by exception? Probably not. You know, I mean, unless the personal statement is I got a 2.33 because I was busy curing cancer, and that's why my GPA is so low because I was in the lab so much and I did find the cure. Then yeah, that's great. That kind of statement will overcome the 2.33. But that's not. No one has that, right? Let's see. There's a lot of questions about SAT scores and things like that. Let's really try to get this for the focus on personal statements. So you have Ms. Aguirre's email, you have my email. Happy to answer any questions you might have about test scores and things like that. How many days would be between the first and second meetings with the elite prep teachers? I'm asking so we know how long we have to draft a personal statement. So we're going to try to get the first meetings scheduled in April sometime. So there's 5 of us elite teachers, and there's going to be presumably 100 students signed up. So we'll have 20 students each. We're going to try to contact our 20 students this week so that we can schedule the first meeting with the students for the first 30 minutes sometime the month of April. And then however long you need between the first and second meeting is, I guess, the answer. Some students will say they'll need like a week or 2 weeks. That's fine. The goal is to finish before June. Finish the hour before June. So finish the first consultation and the second follow-up consultation sometime by the end of May. So however long you need to write those drafts or draft, you can take it. You know, presumably it won't take you 2 months to write your draft. So you'll be done before the end of May. And then however much time you need depends on you. Personally, I think you guys have a lot of time now. You know, everything's been canceled. Even though school is online now, it's not nearly as rigorous as the regular school load you had when school was offline and live. So I think you do have time to work on these essays now if you just sit down and try to crank them out. Let's see, what other questions do we have here?
There was a couple questions about the additional comments sections in the UCs.
Okay.
And of course, if you could answer those prompts, the more information they have, the better. So if it's just because of time and you're already exhausted from writing the 4 essays and you just don't get to them, that's how you want to organize your time. If you have an answer for those questions, it's best to answer them and give them as much information so they could make an informed decision on whether you're admitted or not.
Yes, and also to answer this question, will it hurt if I don't put anything in additional comments? No, not at all. It will not hurt you. If additional comments is blank, it's not going to hurt you. There's no expectation that students will fill it out. But if you do have a use for it, then use it. Absolutely use it. But it's not detrimental to leave it blank. Not at all. Another question came in. If I have a subject that can be applied to 2 different questions, should I use that subject for both? Or should I talk about 2 different subjects? So in other words, if you want to write about, I don't know, ballet, right? Ballet was really important to you. Do you use ballet for 2 of the 4 UC personal insight questions, or should you just keep it to 1? My feeling is if there really are 2 different takeaways from the ballet experience, then it might be fine to split it up into 2 different UC personal insight questions. But as a general rule, it's good to diversify. So if you use ballet for 1 personal statement on the UC application, then it seems a little redundant, maybe slightly a missed opportunity to talk about something else, some other aspect of your high school experience, of your life that you want to amplify in a personal statement. So if there really are 2 significantly different prompts that you want to talk about that ballet satisfies, so maybe most significant challenge, right? I broke my ankle and came back from it and still performed in the ballet recital after recovering from a broken ankle. And then another one is leadership, right? Ballet, you're the prima ballerina, or you train other ballet dancers in your ballet troupe. Yeah, ballet satisfies 2 different UC prompts: leadership and most significant challenge. Then that's fine. But if it's just you can't come up with another idea, another talking point, and you just kind of feel lazy and recycle ballet for another one, maybe that's not as good a reason. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Let's see what else. So we have until 9 o'clock. So We can keep going until 9. If you want to drop off, then thank you, but we'll probably keep going till 9 o'clock, 15 more minutes.
Also, so here's the one about the CSU. So for the CSU, there's no essay that you have to worry about. It's just based on your GPA and
test scores.
yeah.
But also, remember for Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, there is a questionnaire that you fill out, which asks you a little more details about your activities list, basically. But there's no essays on the Cal State application. I didn't mention tonight the coalition application because, frankly, I think Common App is a better application. I'm sure, I know the coalition app can drive school counselors like Ms. Aguirre crazy because it's like yet another platform that you have to log on to and upload information to. So if you're applying to the University of Washington, then unfortunately they are exclusively on the coalition application. At least as of last year, they were exclusively on the coalition app. The personal statement on the coalition app is shorter. It was 600 words, right, Ms. Aguirre, if I recall correctly? 600 words on the coalition app, not 650, like on the Common.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's actually 50 words less for the personal statement for the coalition application. And again, if you're not applying to UW, then just fill out the Common application. It's easier, it's better. One question, can I give us a preview of some upcoming webinars? That's it for this. That's it for the Lowell PTSA webinars for the spring. There was one on holistic review, and then this one tonight on personal statements. If you want, email me. Elite does have a series of webinars on college admissions. It's totally free, no obligation to sign up. The only thing you got to put up with is the Elite presenter plugging Elite classes at the end of it. So if you're okay with that, and you don't succumb easily to sales pitches, then you're welcome to join the Elite Prep webinars. The next one we have is on how to choose a major. No, I'm sorry. It's, guys, anyway, I forget. So we've had webinars on how to do extracurricular activities during the time of COVID-19. We've had webinars on how to maximize your college application. And I did one on, I'm going to do one on whether picking a major on a college application is an advantage or disadvantage. Is it an advantage or disadvantage to apply undeclared, on a college application? So Elite has webinars, more webinars coming up. They happen every Saturday. So if you don't have to be an Elite student or parent to attend the webinar. You're welcome to just, sit in. And again, you don't have to buy anything either. You can just sit in and listen. So that's that.
Also in the College Center, hopefully when we go back to school, right at the beginning of the school year, there will be workshops throughout the day focused on the college essay and getting you started. Usually we did this in this semester, but since we're not at school, it's a little bit more difficult. If you do email me, we could schedule appointments to work on essays and get you started. Yes, but just email me for an appointment. Your school counselors are also available for this if you make appointments or do their drop-in hours to discuss personal statement options and ideas.
There's a question here. Should students submit a generic college essay for review when you work with the Elite teachers, or should you respond to a specific prompt? You should respond to a specific prompt. However, what sometimes happens is the Elite teacher will say, you know what, this essay is actually a better response to this different prompt. So that's possible. So when you bring a draft, don't make it just some generic essay. Really, pick the prompt you're responding to, but sometimes the teachers will tell you, this is actually a more effective essay for this other prompt instead of this one. There's a very good question here about in your personal statement, should you avoid writing about other people's experiences even if you've learned from them? So the answer is, I've read many personal statements that are like that praise the applicant's father or mother or stepfather or stepmother. You know, it's talking about how great my stepfather is, really amazing. He's a super cool guy, and here's why he's really cool. He does this, 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 and this, right? And my response to that is always, too bad the stepfather's not applying. Right? I would have loved to have admitted the stepfather. He sounds like a great guy. So the answer would be, I would avoid spending a lot of time writing about someone else's experiences. The saving grace would be if you can somehow spend more words talking about what you learned from it. So if you learn from it in a significant way, then it's fine to write about other people's experiences, but it should be like 30-70, you know, 30%, 70%, 30% describing that other person's experiences and 70% how it relates to you, okay? It shouldn't be 70% the other person's experiences and then 30% you, okay? So it's fine to write about other people if it did in fact have some kind of meaningful impact on you, but then the vast majority of that personal statement should be about you, not about that other person, because that other person is not applying to college, you are.
There's
How
a
much
question sorry,
no,
go ahead.
Please go ahead, Ms. Gary.
There's a question about answering a prompt, and it's related. It kind of answers two different questions.
Mm-hmm.
I tell students, just write the essay after it's written. We'll figure out which one it fits better with. Yes, so just start the essay and we'll figure out which prompt it answers best after the essay is written.
And so I'm sending an answer to, we also typed in answers to questions. So look in the Q&A box for the answered questions that have been responded to by typing. Let's see what else. Should I mention my major in my personal statement? We've already talked a little bit about that. If you could, so in other words, remember I said you want to paint a picture of yourself, paint a portrait of yourself. And if, you know, nuclear engineering is really is an important part of your identity or your aspirations, then yeah, sure, talk about it. It might be very challenging to show your experience in nuclear engineering as a high school student. So I guess talk about your intended major if it contributes to painting that portrait of yourself. In terms of, and it doesn't have to be a whole essay. You can just, you know, mention it in passing what you intend to major in. You don't have to construct an entire personal statement around it. And then there's one question that came in. If you write about hardship and additional comments, does it need to take the format of a personal statement or essay? No, it does not. Additional comments can just be very matter of fact. It does not have to be a well-crafted piece of literary writing. It can just be, you know, just the facts, you know, just explain stuff. You don't need to come up with some creative literary format for additional comments. It really is very, you know, explanatory. So you don't have to write a beautiful essay for a personal statement, in the way for a personal statement for the additional comment section. Okay, we have 5 more minutes, so let's just try to go through a couple of questions that have come in. Should I recycle statements, answers to statements for each school I apply to, or write a different statement even if the prompt is the same? I would recommend always customizing the personal statement to the prompt. So if you repurpose a UC prompt for a Common App prompt or vice versa, I would tweak at least the first or the last paragraph so that you are mentioning keywords from the prompt in the response itself, so that it's clear that you're responding specifically to that prompt. So for the UC prompt about favorite academic subject, then I would use favorite academic subject in the essay itself. And if you repurpose that for the common application prompt that says, what subject makes you lose all track of time, I would quote this subject, psychology makes me lose all track of time. I would quote those keywords from the common app prompt in the essay itself to make it clear that you're responding specifically to that common app prompt. I hope that makes sense. Like, so there's keywords in the prompts that you should reference in your response to those prompts. So even if it's the same, even if the large chunk of the essay is the same, like you're just copy and pasting most of the essay, if not all of the essay, you should customize it to that specific prompt, even if the rest of the prompt is the same as in both Common App and UC. Okay. Is the death of a grandparent and financial struggles a cliche topic? Also, is it a legitimate struggle if my grades stay decent? That's a difficult one. Death of a grandparent is fairly common, and it is always tragic for the students. If your grades stayed the same, you could point out how you worked super hard to maintain strong grades even through the death of a grandparent, right? So this is one example of talking through the hardship, not about the hardship. Maybe mention the hardship in passing. My grandfather passed away, and I still, I wanted to stay home and cry every day, but I dragged myself to school and forced myself to learn and do well in school. That, so that it's possible it's possible. It is a fairly common, but again, if you can make it compelling, then great. Financial struggles, also fairly common. But again, if it did impact your family, then really we should know about it. It's a good idea to share that information, okay? Is it really bad if I didn't do anything outside of class? It could be challenging to get into the more selective schools, which kind of expect you to do stuff outside of the school. But keep in mind that it doesn't have to be a school-based activity. If you're super involved in your church or your synagogue or your temple, great. Then that can be something that you did outside of class. If you take care of your little sister every day after school because your parents are both working until late, then that's something you did outside of class. So it can be very broadly construed. When will we get contacted about scheduling? If you are one of the 100 students that gets the consultation, the free consultation session, probably this week, sometime this week, hopefully.
Divorce is a common topic.
Yeah.
So somebody asked that.
Yep.
Many topics, it's very rare that I'll read an essay that is completely unique that you could really say I've never read about the topic itself. But there are ways a writer could make a topic that is commonly used refreshing, the way they wrote it or how much time they spent, the details that they put into the essay. But yes, divorce is a common topic.
So there's a question, and let's wrap this up with this one. How do you make a sports essay stand out? Because I talked about how, I said avoid certain cliche topics like, the triumphant sports moment, the music recital. How do you make it stand out? You would try to have surprising takeaways, right? So if it's a sports essay, what are the typical takeaways from a sports essay? Teamwork, perseverance, teamwork and perseverance, right? Those are typically the takeaways. If there's some surprising core value that you take away from the sports essay, that's a good sports essay. So for example, remember I said environmental awareness was one of those core values. Let's say that your sports essay is how you used to go home and get those little black rubber pellets in your cleats after practice because you played on artificial turf all the time. And then that got you interested in, I wonder if this is actually environmentally harmful, net harm to the environment to play on these artificial turfs. And then you did research on that. There's an interesting takeaway, right? Environmental awareness is not a typical takeaway to a sports essay. So if there's a surprising core value that comes out of it, then great. If the core value that comes out of it is hard work and teamwork, no, don't, I would avoid it. Okay, so it's past 9 o'clock. I want to say thank you very much for attending tonight. Really appreciate your spending 2 hours with us, and I hope that you came away with something valuable, some ideas for what you write about for your personal statements. So thank you so much on behalf of me and Ms. Aguirre, and on behalf of the Lowell PTSA. I hope you stay safe and healthy, and good luck with your personal statements and your college applications. All right, take care. Good night.
Hi, everyone.